It's Hump Day, Wednesday, June 9th, 2020, and this is your Daily Detroit. We've been sharing what to know all throughout this long coronavirus quarantine. I'm Sven Gustafson, and Jer, it feels like we're starting to go back to that whole where to go part of our tagline here at Daily Detroit. I mean, my wife was out last night coming home from running errands, and she was telling me that she saw people actually in the patio at Como's and crowding some of the other restaurants in Ferndale that have reopened. And she was like, it's just so nice to see people out frequenting restaurants again.
Down here in the Midtown area, things were starting to pop off as well, with people just going out and just wanting to enjoy a drink and get out in the world. I will say, remember to wear your masks when you do it, but I mean, it's good to see people again. I'm Jer Stays. On today's show, I talk with Dr. Paul Thomas about the medical and health impacts and dangers of tear gas, pepper spray, and what's commonly known as rubber bullets, but more accurately should be called baton rounds. It's an interesting conversation because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around these types of weapons.
Yeah, definitely timely topics. I read that an association of eye doctors was actually issuing a plea for police to stop using tear gas and these so-called rubber bullets because of the damage that they can do to human eyes. After Jer's interview with Dr. Paul, we tell you about 3 more things you need to know around town today.
Joining me is Dr. Paul Thomas from Plum Health Direct to Primary Care. Dr. Paul, welcome back to Daily Detroit.
Thanks so much for having me on, Jer. Great to be here.
Well, this topic is going to be a little bit heavier than some of the other ones that we've covered as of late, specifically because of everything that has been happening around protests and police action and all of that. Specifically, I wanted to get into kind of the medical view of what are viewed by law enforcement as like non-lethal weapons. So talk about what their impacts are, because I think there is this kind of feeling among the public that things like tear gas and pepper spray and rubber bullets are used and they have no harmful effects, when that can be not the case.
Yeah, definitely not the case. And we've seen some of those incidents play out here lately.
Yeah, and in fact, to give people an idea, your facility was actually tagged during protests. It's something that we were able to wash off the windows, but this is something that, you all have had a real front row seat for.
Yeah, we're on Michigan Avenue, and part of our business at Plum Health is being intentionally accessible for people. So we have really big windows that face Michigan Avenue near Trumbull. And unfortunately, somebody decided to spray paint our windows, but we understand that, it's just a shop window. We were able to wash it off, and, it's part of the bigger movement that we're understanding of. But we've definitely had a front row seat to this, and we've seen a lot happening on Michigan Avenue every day.
So let's kind of walk through them. First off, tear gas, it's something that is actually banned for international warfare, but is used commonly on the streets of the United States. First off, what does it exactly do? And then what is its long-term impact?
Yeah, so basically, tear gas is usually made out of capsicum or capsicum. The actual ingredient is oleoresin capsicum, and it's basically what you would find in like a chili or in a pepper, and it's that component. And we use this substance in a lot of different uses. There's like capsaicin cream that somebody with arthritis might rub into their knees, and we all know the effects of it if we've handled a hot pepper then accidentally touched our eyes. And that would be at like a mild or moderate concentration depending on the heat of the pepper. But with police forces using this chemical spray, it's super concentrated and it can cause damage to the eyes. And specifically, it damages the outer layer of the eyeball or the epithelium of the eye. And so for the basis of it is you want to wash this chemical off your eyes as quickly as possible, typically with water, to remove that oil from your eyes. And a lot of people have been using milk because it can neutralize the oil a little bit better than water can, a little bit faster. But you have to be careful with that substance because milk can harbor bacteria. It can be a nice place for bacteria to grow. And you don't want to put bacteria into recently damaged eye tissue, as it might cause a bad infection.
One of the things it does is it forces people to cough, which during a pandemic seems like a double-sided threat. Am I right?
Totally. The pepper spray and the tear gas, it can work its way into your lung tissue, into your esophagus, and cause coughing fits. And if you're worried about a virus that's communicable by people coughing, sneezing, coming into close contact, that's probably the last thing that you want to use to, mollify a crowd, so to speak. So it boggles my mind that police are using these tools to quell like a rioting crowd or disorderly behavior, or to break up peaceful protesters, even worse.
Let's move on to pepper spray. So I didn't realize this, but pepper spray that's used on humans and by the police is often stronger than bear spray.
Yeah, I read that as well. And, I think as a physician, we're not taught this in medical school or in residency, but I've been reading a lot more about these chemicals that we use. And as you mentioned before, these chemicals are banned in international warfare, but for some reason, it's okay for governments via their police forces to use this on their own populations. And so, you might have a low concentration pepper spray that you can use for self-defense. Some sprays are illegal or only available to police at higher concentrations. And those are the sprays that are being used on crowds of people during this Black Lives Matter movement of 2020.
And then one thing that has kind of swept social media are the visual stories of what are commonly called rubber bullets, but they're not really that. I mean, it's not like a paintball gun. These are actually literally called baton rounds. And can we kind of dive into this a little bit?
There's evidence that shows that rubber bullets can cause the globe of your eye to rupture, causing permanent vision loss in that eye that's affected. It can cause broken bones or fractures. It can cause significant bruising. And think about it. If you were to go play paintball, as you said in your example, you'd have to sign a waiver. You must wear a helmet. You must wear goggles. And you're strongly encouraged to wear protective padding over your chest, your abdomen, your genitals, your arms, your elbows, so that if you catch a paintball in the wrong area, you're protected from serious damage. And it's not so when the police use it on our own citizens in the streets. They seem to be indiscriminately firing at reporters, at protesters, even people on their porches. We've seen this happen. So it's almost shameful to see how these are used, knowing that the damage that these projectiles can cause.
So from a medical perspective, are there better ways to control crowds, de-escalation training, things like that? Have you given any thought to this topic?
Oh, totally. I mean, I think about that just as a concerned citizen. It's like if you're trying to peacefully have a protest or a rally or whatever, and there are peaceful protesters or elements of a protest, the worst thing is to fire upon those people or spray people or fire rubber bullets that can cause real damage to people, because somebody in the protest to see that act and then perhaps a violent retaliation for that initial offense. So we've seen that happen where, somebody is tear gassed, and then once that tear gas is sprayed out or thrown into the crowd starts throwing things back like bricks or a piece of wood or rocks or whatever they may find on the street. So, ironically, these tools that police are using to de-escalate tensions are appearing, to my eye, to cause more harm and more escalation of violence.
And it seems like watching over the last couple of weeks what's unfolded in Detroit is that when the curfew was no longer enforced, the violence really dropped down, the conflicts between police and protesters.
Of course. I mean, I saw that as well. I'm not watching as closely as perhaps you are as a journalist, but just seeing the reports, seeing the news media, and seeing what has transpired, it feels like those initial days were the most tense when there was the largest police presence. And now that the police have kind of stepped back and allowed protesters to do their marches, chants, and congregate without enforcing a curfew, there's been much less violence and much less damage to people and property.
Yeah, and I wanted to highlight that because a lot of people view the news as only what they see on TV or cable TV news. And the thing is about that is what makes TV news is the stuff that's visual, fire, mayhem, that kind of thing. And if there aren't those kind of strong visuals, it doesn't make it to air. And I know this because I used to work in TV news. And not to say that there weren't issues with this protest. There definitely were in Detroit. But compared to other cities, we've fared a lot better.
Of course. And, ironically, I didn't know if I was going to bring this up or not, but a reporter from a major national news outlet reached out to us and asked, "Hey, I heard your business was damaged." And I was like, "Well, it was just some paint. We actually washed it off and everything's okay now." And they promptly ended the conversation and said, "Oh, okay, well, have a good day." And they were looking for the next piece of news to sensationalize. I just wanted to add that to the conversation because a lot of what we do see on television is highly sensationalized, and a lot of the protests that have been happening here in Detroit specifically have been peaceful, nonviolent, people marching and chanting and demanding for better rights. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
Well, Dr. Thomas, Plum Health, Direct Primary Care, thank you so much for joining us on Daily Detroit today. We'll put a link in the show notes to what you're doing.
Well, thanks so much, Jer. Always a pleasure being on the show, and I appreciate your time.
Here are 3 more things to know today. One Metro Detroit County leader has announced they're looking to end their emergency declaration around the coronavirus. Macomb County Executive Mark Hackle, in a YouTube video, said that if trends don't reverse, he'll let the county's emergency declaration end on June 26th.
So with that being said, at a point where we were looking at 200 cases a day and now looking at less than 20, at a point where we saw 33 deaths a day and now looking at less than 1 over a 7-day period, average, and as well as the percentage of people. At one point in time, people that were getting tested, almost 50% of them were testing positive, whereas today it's less than 3%. So a great story to tell.
The state of emergency has been in place since mid-March in Macomb, and it activates things like their response center. And it means that almost all available resources go toward coronavirus-related activities. Macomb is the first area county to declare that intent.
The 2020 Mackinac Policy Conference is officially no longer a thing. The Detroit Regional Chamber says it's officially canceling the in-person 3-day shindig on Mackinac Island after initially postponing it to August from its customary slot right after Memorial Day. Leadership Detroit and other chamber events are also canceled for the remainder of this year. Says Chamber President and CEO Sandy Barua, quote, "It has become clear that social distancing will be with us for a while, and if there's one thing the Mackinac Policy Conference, Leadership Detroit, and many of our events have never been and could never be, it's socially distant," end quote. In its place will be a digital series of conversations in late summer. They'll focus on Michigan's COVID-19 response, our economic recovery, racial injustice, and the 2020 election. Jer, I know you got thoughts about this, man. This was kind of your favorite event of the year in some ways.
I mean, I know that there's a lot of people who knock the conference, and I get it, but to me, it's a great opportunity for our show to have some great conversations with folks in places that we just wouldn't have a chance to, and it's also better to interview those people in person. So we stack up interview after interview over the last few years up there, so it's really an opportunity missed. I hope we have an opportunity to do more, but I would pull out here that this is a conference that's mostly funded by large businesses. And large businesses have said, we're not doing travel. We're not doing large events. And that is across the board. And regardless of what a poll that the chamber put out says, the vast majority of people are more worried about the coronavirus.
Yesterday on this show, we told you about plans for Detroit City FC's men's team to stage a fall season. Today, there's word that the United Women's Soccer League has canceled its 2020 regular season due to the coronavirus pandemic. That's where City's first ever women's team had planned to kick off play starting last month. UWS said it plans to issue a credit to each club worth around 80% of this year's entry fees that clubs can apply to next season. Meanwhile, City says it's working with the league to stage alternative competitions for the women's team this season. More details are supposed to come out soon about that. And that'll do it for today's show. If you like what you're hearing, tell a friend about us. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, become a member at patreon.com/dailydetroit. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Chair Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll get through this together. Talk with you tomorrow.